Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks and these are the top stories of this Tuesday. Rishi Sunak officially takes office as the UK's new Prime Minister, speaks of the country's profound economic crisis and says it's his task to correct the mistakes made by his predecessor Liz Truss. President Joe Biden will receive an updated COVID-19 booster shot as cases of infections and hospitalizations surge in New York. Students protest at universities across Iran despite a bloody crackdown as tensions mount on the eve of planned ceremonies marking 40 days since Mahsa Amini's death. Basketball star Brittany Griner's appeal against a 9-year jail sentence is rejected by a Russian court. And German sportswear giant Adidas says it's ending its partnership with Kanye West after the rapper's series of recent anti-Semitic outbursts.
I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, and that work begins immediately. I will place economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government's agenda. This will mean difficult decisions to come.
And so we begin today in the UK, where Rishi Sunak has become the country's new Prime Minister. He's made his first speech in the role and is now setting about the task of forming his government. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer becomes the UK's 57th Prime Minister after being invited to form a government by King Charles III earlier today. He is, of course, Britain's third Prime Minister since April and enters Downing Street as the youngest leader in over 2 centuries and quite possibly the wealthiest person ever to occupy the UK's top political job. At the age of just 42, he promised to bring stability and unity to Britain as he addressed the country in front of that famous Downing Street front door.
But some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them. And that work begins immediately.
Hours earlier, his predecessor Liz Truss gave a short farewell speech, saying it had been a huge honour for her to serve as Prime Minister despite her very brief tenure in the role. Liz Truss resigned after her mini-budget of tax cuts funded by debt sent shockwaves through global financial markets, reducing the pound to a record low and costing the country billions in emergency financial assistance after yields on government bonds soared. Within days, Truss U-turned, fired her finance minister. His successor then scaled back a cap on soaring energy bills that have contributed heavily to a cost of living crisis for tens of millions of people across the UK. Prime Minister Sunak today sought to project himself as a rock of stability. He said that while the country faces a profound economic crisis, he has the seriousness and tenacity to confront it. Now he's choosing his cabinet, always a complicated process, but this time even more so, given the divisions that have almost torn the governing Conservative Party asunder. The new UK Prime Minister is expected to keep at least some current cabinet ministers in their posts, including Jeremy Hunt, the man drafted in by Liz Truss to take over as Chancellor earlier this month. Penny Mordaunt, one of Sunak's leadership rivals, is also expected to receive an important role in cabinet, possibly Foreign Secretary. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, one of the few cabinet secretaries to keep his job during both the administrations of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, he may stay on to keep watch over the Ukraine crisis. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman may make a cabinet return after supporting Sunak's leadership bid. Kemi Badenoch, the UK Trade Secretary, is popular within the Conservative Party and may retain her role or be promoted. Former Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab came out early in support of the new UK leader. There has been speculation that he could become Deputy Prime Minister, but there are also reports now that he may make a return to the Ministry of Justice. Of this, let's go live to Danny Hewson, AJ Bell financial analyst, who joins us live from the British city of Huddersfield. Danny Hewson, thanks very much indeed for being with us today. Of course, there's a lot of speculation about precisely which figures will fill which roles in Rishi Sunak's cabinet, but there is no speculation about the main message that he was delivering earlier today, and that is basically the claim that he is the man who can fix the disastrous state into which Britain has fallen over the last several months.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last several months have really been dire for the UK economy. And there's no doubt that he has a tough job to do. And he's made no bones about the fact that he knows that it is going to be an incredibly difficult ask for him as the new Prime Minister. He does obviously have a relationship with investors, with markets and with the British people, because he was Chancellor of the Exchequer during an incredibly difficult time for the UK during, of course, COVID lockdowns. And he was responsible for bringing in the furlough scheme, among others, which helped keep British people basically in a job during what was a very difficult time indeed. So he has said, yes, there will be difficult decisions to make, but he has appealed to markets saying that he understands the importance of fiscal responsibility.
And Danny Hewson, what is he going to do about disunity within the Conservative Party? There's been obviously lots of talk today about trying to unite the party around his leadership, with some figures close to Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, and indeed Boris Johnson himself today saying it's time for everyone to unite. But that's today. What happens tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, he is going to have to work incredibly hard to make this government work. We've seen over the last few months what happens to a country which basically doesn't have anyone with a hand on the steering wheel. And clearly, during these incredibly difficult economic time, what we need is a government that is prepared to take us in a direction and keep heading in that direction. He is going to have to reach out right across the party in order to bring people on board who maybe weren't part of Liz Truss's cabinet, to bring on board a number of people that were Liz Truss supporters. But we know that the Conservative Party is a very prickly place indeed. He is not the most popular person within that party, and he is going to have his work cut out for him.
And Danny, very briefly, what's next for the markets? All eyes on that fiscal statement that's coming at the end of the month from the now new British government?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing today will be who will be in position at number 11. It is widely anticipated that Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor who was brought in by Liz Truss to basically U-turn all those things that she put in place during the mini budget, will stay in post. That would seem likely, considering that, as you say, this new fiscal update is due on Halloween, just a few days away. That is certainly what markets need. They want to see a clear picture of the health of the UK economy. They want to be sure that any tax cuts, the spending, clearly that energy policy, which has been scaled back, they want to know what that means for the UK finances. The fact that yield costs have come down, those government borrowing costs, quite significantly since Rishi Sunak was put in post as Prime Minister, is a good sign, but there is an awfully long way to go, and markets will be watching to see what happens next.
Danny Hewson, financial analyst with AJ Bell, joining us live from the city of Huddersfield, which by chance is the birthplace of a former British Prime Minister, Harold Wilson. Danny, thanks very much indeed for being with us today.
This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level.
10 Downing Street gets first non-white Prime Minister. Indian origin Sunak is the youngest UK Prime Minister in 200 years. From UK's Finance Minister to bagging the top job. Meteoric rise of the Maharaja of Dales. Sunak inherits an economy in crisis. Can he soothe the markets and tame inflation?
Trust is earned, and I will earn yours.
Sunak, the new UK Prime Minister.
Now, here in the United States, the countdown to the country's midterm elections is on, with high-stakes races set to take place on November the 8th. They will determine the future for Congress and therefore for the Biden administration. Early voting is already underway in several states. On Monday, President Biden expressed confidence that things will turn in favour of the Democrats in the last fortnight of the campaign. But Republicans continue to assail Biden's policies for high US inflation and increases in crime, seeking to make the midterm race a referendum on his presidency. In Philadelphia, 2 weeks before the midterms, people cast their ballots in secured boxes. The city has installed mail ballot drop boxes with fire extinguishers mounted on them and cameras around them to monitor the conduct of the election.
Since 2020, we've had to take a more integral look at security, both physical security and the security process. You know, elections are, there's a lot of redundancy in the process. So, you know, people should be rest assured that voting is safe, it's free and fair, and it's totally legit.
Meanwhile, 2 weeks ahead of the midterms, Republicans up and down the ballot are embracing defeated President Donald Trump's entirely false claim that the 2020 election was stolen. The Washington-based Brookings Institution has identified 249 of these so-called election deniers running in the 567 races for the House, Senate and key statewide offices. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a presidential hopeful in 2024 on the Republican side, refused to say whether he would commit to serving a full 4-year term if he is re-elected as the Sunshine State's governor. In a heated Florida gubernatorial televised debate, DeSantis called his opponent, Congressman Charlie Crist, a worn-out old donkey.
Well, listen, I know that Charlie's interested in talking about 2024 and Joe Biden, but I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist. I'm proud of our history. I don't want to teach kids to hate our country. I don't want to teach kids to hate each other. And the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race.
Chris attacked DeSantis on the law he signed in April banning abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy.
I would like to see everybody have a shot. I'm proud of the 15 weeks that we did.
Up for grabs in the elections, the entire House of Representatives and 1/3 of the seats in the US Senate. Currently, the Senate is split 50-50 between the two main parties, with Democrats in charge due to Vice President Kamala Harris's casting vote. If Republicans flip even one Democrat-held seat and hold on to all their others, they will gain the power they need to change President Joe Biden's agenda and halt it in its tracks. For more on all of this, I'm joined today by WION's North America correspondent Susan Tehrani. She is live for us in New York. Susan, bring us up to date with the latest polling, because there has, in many polls, been some quite grim reading for President Biden and the Democrats, but there are others that suggest that Democrats may have some reason to dream that this isn't going to be quite as bad a midterm cycle as many of them some months ago had feared.
Absolutely. And you know how it is with polls. We won't know until November 8th and election night, and then some, perhaps. But, you know, what's interesting is that the Democrats really banked on this message of abortion. And while it had some heat and some prospects of voter enthusiasm during the summer, what we're seeing with inflation and with the economy time and again, people going to the grocery stores, really having a hard time catching up with their bills and paying their bills, we're seeing that abortion really is not at the forefront. But President Biden himself and a lot of Democrats continue to really try to push the message of abortion on the whole of America, when for many Americans, it's really clear to see that that's not a priority. And that's what we're seeing in poll after poll. Abortion is not polling. What is polling right now is inflation, the economy, and also crime. I mean, crime is really something that's really up there in these final weeks. And we're seeing that not only in a lot of red states, here in blue states. I mean, New York crime has been at the forefront to an extent where something unimaginable has happened in the governor's race, where we have the Republican contender Lee Zeldin almost in a tie with current governor Kathy Hochul. This is an extremely blue state, but because of the issue of crime, you know, we see them neck and neck. Tonight, there is going to be a very much hyped debate between the two. And then we also have to take a look at what's happening in Pennsylvania as well. Another debate that's perhaps really like a boxing match that everyone is going to be watching is going to be between John Fetterman, a Senate candidate, Democrat, who just recently had a stroke, with his Republican contender, Dr. Oz, a TB doctor. And, you know, that's something that many are watching as well. The issue of crime in Pennsylvania also really at the forefront as well. Crime, inflation, but for some reason the Democrats, you know, obviously they can't run on anything regarding the economy, so they're hammering on abortion. I mean, that's definitely going to cost them.
And Susan, can we just briefly postulate one possible outcome here, that the Democrats somehow managed to hold on to control of the Senate, but they lose control of the House of Representatives to the Republicans? If the Republicans take over in the House, but not the Senate, how hobbled will President Biden be?
Yeah, you know, President Biden, these races, the midterms, are ultimately a referendum on the president. And we're seeing that the president is polling extremely low across the board. This is really not only regarding the House and the Senate, but ultimately it's for the future of, and the remaining future of, President Biden's legislative agenda. So President Biden is going to be in trouble. Democrats are going to be in trouble. But I think it's also important to note regarding whether or not the Democrats continue to hold the House or not is to what extent? How close are these numbers ultimately? How close are these votes? And I think that'll paint a better picture on where America stands. I mean, if the numbers are extremely close, then, it'll really paint a picture on, where the Democrats need to adjust, and also the Republicans as well.
Susan Tehrani live for us on the streets of New York, WION's US correspondent. Thanks a lot, Susan. We will talk about this topic again very soon. Now, elsewhere in the United States, 2 people were killed and at least 6 were injured after a gunman opened fire at a school in the city of St. Louis. Officers rushed to the scene and fatally shot the gunman. He was a former student at the school. A woman and a teenage girl were killed during the attack. Police say 6 people sustained shrapnel and gunshot injuries. Some students locked themselves in their classrooms while others fled. The gunman reportedly shouted, "You are all going to die," before he opened fire. One student said she was eye to eye with the shooter before his gun jammed, allowing her to escape.
The officers began to clear the building looking for the shooter. Upon hearing gunfire, they ran to that gunfire, located the shooter, and engaged that shooter in exchange of gunfire.
The police chief in St. Louis said that fast actions by a security guard along with police officers helped end the shooting before more people were killed and injured. Police identified the shooter as a 19-year-old by the name of Orlando Harris. He graduated from the school only last year. They said that they do not know the motive for the attack, which was the 40th school shooting in the United States so far in 2022. Now, Russia is making intensive efforts to warn the world of what it claims are plans by the government of Ukraine to deploy a dirty bomb within the territory of Ukraine. The unsubstantiated claim was conveyed to the US and other governments in a series of phone calls by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and in outreach to the United Nations. Ukraine, of course, has no nuclear capability of its own. President Volodymyr Zelensky is counter-accusing the Kremlin of planning a false flag operation as a pretext for its own military escalation. The UN nuclear watchdog is preparing to send its officials to Ukraine to visit 2 institutes that the Russians allege have been preparing dirty bombs. The aim would be to detect any possible undeclared nuclear activity and materiel that could be used in explosive devices that contain radioactive substances. Dirty bombs are much easier and cheaper to build than a full-fledged nuclear device. They don't cause the same degree of devastation as a nuclear bomb, but could still expose broad areas to radioactive contamination. The war has already entered its ninth month, and there have been many previous incidents of the two sides playing the blame game. But the conflict is now at a crucial crossroads. Since September, Russia has intensified its strikes on Ukraine in an effort to paralyze critical infrastructure following recent substantial Russian territorial losses. In the past few weeks, many water and power supply facilities have come under attack. Moscow has changed its game plan to counter gains that were made by Ukrainian forces. Barely a couple of months after announcing that she was stepping away from tennis, Serena Williams has claimed that her chances of returning to the court are very high. The 41-year-old did not explicitly be her final match. On Monday, at a promotional event for her investment company, Williams said she has not retired. She said the chances of a return are very high. Williams earlier said that she does not like the word retirement and prefers the term evolution. She's widely regarded as one of the greatest players ever to play the sport. However, even for her, a comeback at the age of 41 could be a high bar to reach. Day one of Harvey Weinstein's Los Angeles rape trial started with an accuser breaking down in tears while recounting the sexual assault she was allegedly subjected to by the former Hollywood mogul. On Monday, prosecutors argued that Weinstein sexually assaulted young women who were hoping to make a career in Hollywood. His defence told the jury that there is absolutely no evidence against their client, and they went further, saying that every woman who will testify at the trial is an actor who will be playing a role on the stand to fit a Me Too narrative. Los Angeles County prosecutors have charged Weinstein with 11 counts of sexual assault, stemming from allegations by 5 different women dating back to the year 2004. According to reports, about 80 witnesses in total are expected to testify, including actor Mel Gibson. Weinstein, of course, is already serving a 23-year sentence in a New York prison following conviction at an East Coast trial, but now faces a possible additional life sentence heading into the West Coast legal proceedings. He has denied the charges and pleaded not guilty. The LA trial is expected to last multiple weeks, and a verdict may not be reached until early December. And that is all we have time for today on WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. Meanwhile, stay tuned for all your news updates to WION. World is One.
There are many other. This is right, Arab.